Hello and welcome once again to Iowa News and Views. Thanks for joining us. I'm Derek Maurer, sitting in for Joe Bolcom, who is away doing very important things. And we're glad that you're joining us. We've got a good show lined up tonight. We're talking about food. Can we grow our own food in Iowa? If you joined us last time, you know that we were at the Iowa State Fair. You saw a show last time with Sally Peterson, Lieutenant Governor of Iowa. Well, we're going to have more for the fair, a little bit coming up on this show, and in future shows we've got some more footage and another interview on alternative energy and utility deregulation and other topics, and some more stuff about farming and talking to people at the fair. So tune in again and keep tuning in, and you'll see more from the State Fair. Right now I want to introduce our guests. We have with us tonight, or today, Rich Pirog is a education coordinator with the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture. Rich, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And Carol Hunt is project coordinator with the Johnson County Soil and Water Conservation District. Thank you, Carol, for coming.
Thank you, Derek.
And we're talking today about food and growing food locally. This is something we hear a lot about lately, Iowa becoming the food capital of the world. Governor Vilsack made that a theme of his campaign last year. And, you know, we've heard a lot of talk about that, and I think for most people that means biotech, and really we hear a lot about value added, but I think we think in terms of high-tech stuff with genetic manipulation and things like that. But really, we want to talk about food and what people eat. And it's ironic that in Iowa here, we import most of our food. Is that right, Rich?
Yeah, Derek, the food production and distribution system in this country has changed a lot over the years. You know, the current system that we have, where the San Joaquin Valley in California produces a lot of our fruits and vegetables, or apples are produced in Washington, wasn't always the case. Iowa used to be a major producer of a lot of fruits and vegetables prior to World War II, and that system has changed. That food distribution system has changed in this country, and what we're looking at are some ways that Iowa can get back, not only produce more of this food, but have markets within the state, so this food can be grown locally and also served locally.
Mm-hmm. Carol, you're working on a project here that involves hooking up local producers of fruits and vegetables with local buyers.
That's right.
Let's just put that out there, and we're going to come back to that and talk more about it. But in terms of the fact that we get most of our food from other places, and then we produce huge amounts of commodities that we then export to other places, either nationally or internationally. Rich, is that a problem?
Well, you know, I think it's real important that Iowa explore a lot of different opportunities, and it's important that Iowa continue to look at finding export markets. But as the governor has said about Iowa being the food capital of the world, I think when we're talking about local food, we'd like Iowa to also be the food capital of Iowa, sort of walk our own talk here, be able to produce more of the food that we are eating here in the state, particularly seasonally. You know, I think, for example, in the summer, it would just seem to be a real crime if you go into a restaurant or a hotel in July and get something other than Iowa sweet corn or Iowa tomatoes when they're in season. These are things that we're looking at. We realize we have a limited season, but at least seasonally we want to see Iowa's consumers eat more Iowa produce, Iowa meats, other things that we're able to use. You know, obviously the meats are a year-round thing, but our fruit and vegetables would be more in season.
It's an incredible chance to strengthen our local economies by keeping that money in our communities. And you know, as a cook, I can tell you that the flavor and the freshness and the nutritional value of locally grown, seasonally grown produce is tremendous. So consumers who don't avail themselves of these opportunities are really missing out on something.
It's funny that you know, you want a tomato, you go to the store year-round and buy a tomato, but you don't really think about where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Leopold Center is particular. You've got funding that you're giving out to different projects around the state, and the Leopold Center itself is very much concerned with fostering the kind of agriculture that sustains our soil and our water. Rich, can you tell us a little bit more about the Leopold Center so we know where that's at?
Sure, Derek. The center was created as part of the 1987 Groundwater Protection Act, and we do receive funding from the state, both from general appropriation and also a tax on nitrogen, fertilizer, and pesticides. And we fund projects to try to bring about a more sustainable agriculture here in Iowa. In the last 3 to 4 years, we continue to fund projects in areas like water quality and pest management and nutrient management, and certainly that continues to be a mainstay. But in the last 3 or 4 years, we've started to look at projects dealing with our food system here in Iowa, re-examining just how that food system works. And in the most recent year, one of those projects has been the project in Johnson County that Carol has been working on.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good introduction.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about this project. It's I've seen in print the name Johnson County Neighborhood Farms.
That's the name that we've given to the consortium of producers that I'm currently working with. We have about 10 producers right now who are doing business with 3 institutional buyers in the Iowa City, Coralville area. One of these is the Iowa Memorial Union, which handles all food service activities on campus, in addition to catering, banquets, and the stateroom restaurant. One of them is Fresh Food Concepts, which handles the Mondo's chain of restaurants that's very popular in Iowa City, Coralville. And one of them is Devotee, a small family-run cafe on Market Street. And we have a sort of a core group right now which has been instrumental in the planning stages of this project. And we hope to expand in the future and get more institutional buyers and more growers involved. And this project, as you know, is being funded by the Leopold Center and is being administered by the Johnson County Soil and Water Conservation District, which has a great commitment to serving so-called non-traditional farmers, such as women, minorities, specialty crop producers, small acreage farmers, and the like. Mm-hmm. The district is very concerned about how agriculture affects soil and water quality. Sustainable agriculture is a strong concern of theirs, and so of course local food system development is one way to strengthen this, to address this concern. And urban-rural relationships are another major goal that the district wants to support. And so by strengthening farmer-consumer relationships, we think we can bring about a better understanding between the rural and the urban communities.
Mm-hmm. Well, now why is it that producing fruits and vegetables and stuff that's in season and fresh, why is that have less of an impact on soil and water than growing what we now consider traditional crops, corn and soybeans?
I wouldn't term it in traditional versus non-traditional. I would say that food production offers additional opportunities for better soil and water management, in the sense that a lot of the growers use things like crop rotation, cover crops. Some of them use integrated pest management techniques, even organic farming techniques, which of course can also be practiced and are practiced by traditional corn and soybean producers. But this kind of diversification just gives added opportunity for good land stewardship and water quality monitoring.
Well, what kind of people are these farmers? Are they full-time farmers? Are they people who devote themselves part-time to farming and then also have off-farm income? Or what
It's a mix. I think that the goal of many of them is to farm full-time if they can, but this isn't always feasible. Mm-hmm. So we have some full-time farmers who are putting their life and their soul into it.
Yeah.
Then we have others who have off-farm jobs. And sometimes you get a case where one half of the couple stays home at the farm with the kids, and the other half goes and takes an off-farm job. So it's really quite a diverse group.
Mm-hmm. Well, what, I guess, you've got this project going, and it's been going for about a year now, I understand.
That's right.
And how exactly does it work? I mean, what do you have to do to get the kind of food that your institutional buyers want from the farmers?
Communication. The farmers need to provide me with a list of what they are growing, what they anticipate will be ready in a week or two. I provide or they provide this information to the institutional buyers. Now, the buyers in turn can come back and say, I need thus and so for this event or in the next few weeks. Can you provide it to me? Or they ask me, who can I get this from? And so I act as a broker of sorts in trying to put together the two sides, bring them together, and let one group know what the other is doing.
Yeah. Now, is this a stretch for the restaurants and the Memorial Union? You know, they could order food from somewhere else and they get exactly what they want when they want it. It is a stretch in the sense that it does fly in the conventional way of doing business, ordering from a vendor. But in many cases, what they get from the vendor is not exactly what they want. Mm.
What they want is higher quality, fresher food, food that they have some notion that it's going to taste fresh, be of something they want to set in front of their customer. So it's a challenge for them in many cases, but they are eager and ready to meet that challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking for a better product.
Yeah. Well, Rich, you're working with similar projects
Yes.
in different parts of the state. What are some of the common challenges we just talked
Well,
about?
some of the things that Carol has mentioned are also true in these other locations. Sort of to add what Carol said, these different food service managers or restaurant chefs or managers not only like the fresh quality of the food, they like building that relationship with those local producers. And there's a public relations benefit locally too, where they're doing something to help local growers. That again is sort of a spin-off of that could have some tangible results in the local community if those dollars stay within the community rather than the dollars going outside of the community. Some of the obstacles we look at, as Carol had mentioned, some of these institutions have certain contracts that limit their ability to be able to work with a local producer or a local producer and a broker of some sort that's sort of a go-between. Issues like uniformity sometimes come into play. Maybe a particular food service manager may want asparagus that all are pencil thin, and asparagus may not be that way. Or, for example, tomatoes. If you cut tomatoes, and those fresh Iowa tomatoes, if you put them through that slicer like you'd have for a salad bar, they may just squash. They're not the right kind of tomato. There's certain things that it's sort of a learning experience both for the producer, for the broker, and for the food service manager or chef.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's hold that thought. I want to let our viewers know that you're watching Iowa News and Views. I'm Derek Maurer, and we're talking this time about local food production and encouraging not just the production, but encouraging people to buy and eat food that's produced locally in their own area. I see we've got our email address. We love to hear from viewers. We're challenging you to let us know not only what you think about the show or any ideas you have, but if you just want to tell us what's going on in your community that you think might be of interest to others in the state, let us know. We're on all over the state, and we can get the word out about the different things that are going on. I mentioned at the top of the show that we have a short tableau from the Iowa State Fair. Nathan, are we ready to roll that?
Ruth, can you tell me the price of corn today?
No,
Any kind of a guess?
no, I don't know.
Okay. Lester, could you tell me what the price of corn is today?
I would say around 150.
I have to ask my farmer husband. What's the price of corn today, dear?
I don't know. I should know, but probably don't.
Can you take a guess?
$3.
$1.40 maybe, or $1.30. Am I close?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay. It's not worth much.
I have no idea.
Guess?
$3 a bushel.
Okay.
Don't have a clue. Don't pay attention.
Ears of corn? I mean, like dozen.
Bushel.
I have
corn.
no idea. I only buy corn on the cob. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the last person who spoke, when we asked that question, we thought everybody would know we were asking what's the price of a bushel of corn, but she assumed that we meant corn on the cob at the store, and I think that just shows how most of us have a relationship with food that begins at the supermarket. So that ties in somehow with what we're talking about. I'm not sure exactly how, but
Well, it can be a very alienating experience. You lose that connection between your food and where it comes from.
yeah. And again, I mean, you talked about the tomatoes that you buy the ones that are rock hard, and you can slice them all nicely in a slicer in a machine. And the fresh tomatoes, you can't necessarily do that. Carol, how's this project being received by the different participants in it? What kind of feedback are you getting about it?
It's been very upbeat. People are devoted to it and very excited about the potential for the future. I've heard feedback that customers are receiving the locally grown food very well. And I think that there is an interest in pushing this forward and seeing it grow. The participants, the buyers are wonderful to work with. They are very much behind the process. And the growers have that entrepreneurial spirit that I think it takes to get something like this going.
So as you perhaps look forward to this growing not only in each locality, but maybe more of these projects around the state, what kind of changes are we going to need to see, or what kind of support are we going to need to have maybe at a policy level that will facilitate that process of growth?
Well, both Carol and I serve on a task force that was appointed by Secretary of Agriculture Patty Judge to make some recommendations about local food here in the state. And we hope we'll be giving those recommendations to the Secretary shortly, and probably in early September. And we're going to have some kind of meeting with the Secretary to announce those recommendations shortly afterwards. And we hope that those recommendations may have a lot of value in looking at some of the policies that we have here in the state as far as local food goes.
Okay.
Public education is one thing we want to push. Gathering of data to see where we are in order to determine where we need to go. Building of infrastructure to actually get the product to the buyers. There are a number of foci that we're looking at.
The infrastructure, I think what Carol talked about, is a real important part of this. There really isn't much of an infrastructure right now to be able to serve local food at restaurants or at various institutions. We don't necessarily want to create a totally different infrastructure. There's some farmers that may want to work with a buyer or a distributor. Other farmers may want to go direct to a restaurant or an institution. So we'd like to have more options for Iowa producers so they can have more of a control of their own destiny of what they look at. And again, going back to the corn and soybean issue, some Iowa farmers may be able to supplement their income with growing fruits or vegetables, or being able to somehow work with Iowa-grown meats if they're a livestock producer. We want to create as many options as possible for Iowa producers with programs with local food systems.
I'm glad you brought up meat. Carol, do you have meat producers in
We
this?
do have meat producers, and one of the challenges we're facing is that for the most part they are not licensed for retail sales of cuts of meat, but they rather have chosen to sell their animals by the whole animal or the half animal. And this challenges the buyer to be able to use the entire animal in every single cut and to do it as economically as possible. So there are some challenges there in terms of the actual food production. How do you use a whole cow?
Okay. So
There also are some rules and regulations. The producer, that livestock producer, has to, if he or she sells that livestock, that meat, it has to be at least state inspected and go through a state inspected facility. It can't just be custom butchered and labeled not for sale. That meat cannot be sold at a restaurant or public institution. So they have to follow the state guidelines when selling meat within the state.
But there aren't similar guidelines concerning fresh produce? In terms of its inspections, there's nothing like that?
If it's not processed, no.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right.
Well, in a way, it sounds like trying to recover some of the habits of buying and consuming that existed in past generations that we've lost in the past 50 years.
Right, we're
or
not
so.
talking about doing anything new, really. We're just talking about returning to maybe a different way of eating.
And I think a way that has a lot of community support to it. People seem to like this not only because of the produce or meat and the good feeling of knowing where the food came from, but also that sense of community that sort of is engendered when they're buying locally with a group of people that are coming together, or at a restaurant or what have you, farmer's market. Sort of putting a face on the farmer, which I think is real appealing to consumers.
Well, we know there's a project in Johnson County. Rich, can you just name at least some of the other projects so people know where they are?
Sure. There's a project in Story County that is coordinated by the Practical Farmers of Iowa, and they're looking at examining different models of how this food can be brokered or distributed. There's a project in Black Hawk County with University of Northern Iowa and Allen Hospital that's been going on. This is the third year. Last year, that project made changes in its purchase of produce. At Allen Hospital, they went from about 1% purchased locally during the growing season to about 22% of their produce. So there's been significant strides in that project. We also have a new project looking at local food systems in 3 different counties, sort of a survey case study of 3 different counties that are very different in their makeup and structure within the state. Those are just a few of the projects that we've got going on, and we also support a number of different conferences and workshops dealing with local food systems around the state. And like Carol here, whenever we have a conference, we try to serve local food whenever possible if we can.
Carol, tell us a little bit about your sideline here.
Carol's Traveling Local Food Show. Well, as part of my job, I like to serve local food whenever possible. If an organization which is having a workshop calls me and says, Carol, would you cater a lunch for 40 people using local foods? Then I will source the food, I will prepare the food, usually a buffet, a sandwich and salad buffet. And usually a little bit on the exotic side by many people's tastes. I bring in cross-cultural influences, all from Iowa-grown food and as close to home as I can find it. And the reception to these buffets is overwhelmingly positive. People, you can talk to you blue in the face about local food systems, but when you serve somebody a locally grown meal, it all comes home. It all makes sense to them. And they want to know, where do I get that? How do I find this product? And it's a wonderful educational tool.
So that's another way to expose people to the freshness that could be in all of our food, or much more of it anyway.
That's right.
Well, if our viewers are interested in getting involved in a project like this, or maybe starting a new one, what can they do?
Well, outside, obviously in Johnson County, they should be contacting Carol.
They can call me. I can put them in contact with people and organizations that I know that I feel could help them. I could tell them how I did what I did, and just try to help guide them through the system the same way I was guided by people who have done this before me. And then, of course, there are organizations like the Leopold Center that can be called upon for.
We'd be glad to provide information, and for groups that meet certain qualifications, it has to be either an educational institution or a nonprofit organization. We can consider running projects, or at the very least, we'll provide resources and information on where they can get more information, more contacts on local food systems.
Okay. Well, during our credits at the end, people will have a chance to see your contact information. So that's all good information for anybody who might be interested in this. We're down to a couple of minutes. Is there anything we didn't say that we should have said?
Well, we didn't throw out many facts and figures, but just to underscore the potential in a state like Iowa, I think in 1998, Iowans purchase about $8 billion worth of food. And of that $8 billion, about $2.5 billion is in eating and drinking places. Now, yes, the corn and soybeans and the rest of the ag industry are driving the economy, and they're very important, and we continue to put emphasis on them, but we can't ignore that $8 billion of food that's purchased, $2.5 billion in eating and drinking places. There's some potential for Iowa producers to tap into that.
Okay. Carol, any quick words?
And you've got to remember that if $2.5 billion of that $8 billion is spent in restaurants, then the rest of it must be spent in supermarkets, which would be another possible venue for sale of Iowa-grown products. And then the farmers markets, the direct sales, the on-farm produce stands, these are all places where money could be spent on locally grown food.
Okay. Well, I have to wrap it up here, but I want to thank you both very much for being here. Carol Hunt of the Johnson County Soil and Water Conservation District, Rich Pirog of the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching tonight. Thank the crew, Nathan and Tom back in the booth, and I want to take a moment just to give a very special note of appreciation to our camera operator, Linda Nelson, who's going to step aside from iNews. She's been with us from the beginning, and we certainly appreciate all of her help and her hard work, and we'll hope to get you back sometime. Thanks again for watching. Tune in again next time.